Breaking news coming in. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi is feared to have been killed in a helicopter crash. The helicopter was flying from the East Azerbaijan region towards Tehran when the crash took place about 30 minutes into the flight. Information that's coming in seems to suggest even Iran's foreign minister Hossein Amirabdollhian has been killed in this helicopter crash. In all, there were 9 passengers on board this helicopter that crashed late Sunday when it was crossing a mountainous terrain in very heavy fog. So 3 helicopters took off after a dam was inaugurated. The Iranian president was on board one of these helicopters, and reports seem to suggest that the chopper crashed in the Jolfa area. This is northwestern Iran and is about 600 kilometers from capital Tehran. Rescue teams fought blizzards, fought not just very difficult terrain but also weather conditions through the night, and they've succeeded in reaching the wreckage of that helicopter. This is in the East Azerbaijan province, and early this morning, early hours of Monday morning, they reached the wreckage site. The chopper was completely burnt. President Raisi was returning from a ceremony to inaugurate a dam on Iran's common border with the Republic of Azerbaijan. There were 3 helicopters that were flying together. 2 of them were carrying ministers and officials. They arrived safely, but the presidential helicopter, it lost contact and then is feared to have crashed. For several hours, Iranian authorities said the combined national resources from the army to the air force, combined national resources were engaged in the task of trying to locate this helicopter. People in Iran knew something had gone wrong when regular programming on television stopped and only prayer ceremonies and prayer meetings were broadcast on TV. Then information came out that the presidential chopper had crashed. Remember, all of this comes at a time when Iran and Israel are engaged in virtually a conflict. In April, Iran had fired hundreds of rockets and missiles towards Israel. Israel had promised there would be consequences. But can this be linked? There is no evidence so far to suggest there is any link. But Iranian-backed militia, whether it's the Hamas terrorists that attacked Israel on the 7th of October, to the Houthi fighters, to the Hezbollah, they've been targeting Israel, all backed by Iran. Tension extremely high across the region. So whether it's the United States or countries across the region, they're watching developments very carefully. Of course, the supreme leader in Iran has said that there would be smooth progress, work would continue. But I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan, who joins us for more on this big story. Also with me is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. Ambassador Dayal had served in Iran, was India's deputy envoy to Iran. He joins us on the broadcast. But Geeta, what's the latest that you can tell us? Has the Iranian Red Cross had confirmed? State media was indicating there are no survivors, but is there an official confirmation from the government now?
Well, yes, there is an official confirmation from the government. The IRSC chief, Pir Hossein Amirabdollhian, had said that there are no trace of survivors that have been seen after the discovery of the site of the crashed helicopter. And he also said that the site of the crash involving President Raisi and senior officials accompanying him had been found after hours of extensive search in a mountainous region in the province of East Azerbaijan. So that's the confirmation now coming in from Iran. The fact that there are no survivors, there is going to be an investigation that will be carried out. He was in a convoy of helicopters. There were 2, one in front and piloting the president's helicopter, and one behind. So there will be investigation and questions from asked from those who the helicopters who were accompanying the said helicopter. But there are no survivors for now. A huge loss for Iran, Gaurav. It's not just the president, but two very important people in Khamenei's administration, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's administration, who've lost their lives, President Raisi and the foreign
The foreign
minister.
minister.
Again, very, very important. Both of them were critical in various foreign policy decision-making
Of
process.
course, hardliners. If we were to talk about the president of Iran, he was a hardliner, whether it was the hijab rule or the chastity rule, major restrictions on movement of women, on what they wore, how they behaved in public. But tell me this, any initial information coming in? Because this was, after all, the presidential helicopter that crashed. Two other helicopters came back safe. What went wrong with this helicopter, especially given tensions with Israel?
Well, as of now, too early to say, Gaurav, what really went wrong. For now, they are only saying it's due to inclement weather. But then again, we've not seen many leaders actually travel when the weather conditions turn so bad. Did the weather turn very bad after the takeoff, or was it before itself? Is something, again, we'll have to wait and see. The weather assessments to carry the president and the delegation back home, who took that call, how's that call taken, is something we'll have to wait and see. Why do I say this? Is because once the news came in of the helicopter crash, the rescue operations itself were quite difficult to manage because of inclement weather. The ambulances and the forces who were trying to reach the site couldn't reach the site late last night. It got dark, and only in the wee hours when there was some light that they could actually manage to find the crash site. We do know that there were drones that were also deployed to look for the crash site, and the first visuals that came, the first footage that came, were from they were aerial visuals, not ground visuals.
In fact, those are visuals that we are playing out on the screen right now. Turkey came in and helped. Turkey sent in its drones, as did the European Union, that promised to help with satellite imagery when not much was known. But Ambassador Dayal, the presidential helicopter that crashed, we're told, was the Bell 212. My question to you is, the other two helicopters came back and landed safely. Only the presidential helicopter crashed. Would questions be asked, especially given tensions between Israel and Iran and that April missile and rocket attacks that took place in Israel?
Well, Gaurav, thanks for having me on your show to discuss this very, very important international event. I think that the helicopter crash involving the Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi and some other senior officials could have very significant implications for the Middle East. No proof has been found till now of external involvement, but there are already suspicions. And given the overall context of the situation in the Middle East, these fears and suspicions could only increase with time. Tensions in the Middle East could increase. Now, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas has involved other Iranian allies, with each attack and counterattack threatening to trigger a broader war. So I think that this volatile situation would be ignited further by these recent unexpected events. And I think we have to wait and watch what is really going to happen. But there is no doubt that the hardliners will be now in a stronger position in Iran, because there will be a lot of claims that there is an external hand. And I think that Iran's policy in the region and in the world beyond will be more tough as regards its antagonists.
Oh, absolutely. Because when you look at the situation in West Asia right now, Geeta, you and I were reporting from Israel after that October 7 incident that had taken place. And we've been reporting from the region. But tell me this, Iran is seen as a country that backs Hamas to the hilt, backs Hezbollah to the hilt, backs the Houthi rebels to the hilt. And President Raisi was seen as a hardliner internally and externally. What does this incident mean for the region in your appreciation, Geeta?
Well, it is going to be a very, very difficult time, given, like we were discussing just a while ago, Gaurav, that Ibrahim Raisi was critical in the policies that were formulated in the recent past with the supreme leader, whether it is the Israel-Hamas war or, for that matter, their nuclear program, and how they were dealing with the West and the sanctions. So it is going to be a difficult time for not just Iran, but for West Asia. But again, it all depends on what the investigations really throw up to see whether if there is going to be a larger conflict over here, or are we looking at a confined transition that would take place in Iran. Now, there are rules for the transition. If something happens to the president, or if during his tenure or her tenure, if the president dies, then the vice president takes over, and the vice president then has to ensure that in this smooth transition, there is also a decision of elections within 50 days. We'll again have to wait and see how this really pans out. His term was to end in 2025, which is next year, but it's 1 year too soon. It's not about the elections, which will in all probability take place, given that this is a smooth transition from one president to the other. And the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is in charge of Iran, who is completely in control and everything works under him, is still there to call the shots. So I don't see much of instability within. There have been huge questions with regards to succession, but that has to do with the supreme leader's succession, not to do with the government.
Interesting, you mentioned the supreme leader's succession because Ambassador Dayal, President Raisi was seen as someone who was in line to be the next supreme leader of Iran. He was also seen as someone who was pushing the hardline agenda within Iran. So very popular amongst the hardliners, but whether it were the youth or especially the women, since he was enforcing that hijab rule or chastity rule on women, how they should wear, what they should wear, how they should appear in public. How popular or lack of it was he on the streets of Iran, sir?
Well, he was certainly a hardliner. And the hardliners do enjoy a lot of popularity with the radical Islamist groups within Iran, but certainly not with the masses at large, because they are seen to be people who are enforcing policies like the hijab-related policies, and which are unpopular with the people. Now, what about the issue of succession to Khamenei? You are right, he was certainly seen as the front runner, and everything is now going to be up in the air. It remains to be seen who really becomes the real force within Iran after the demise of the president. The first vice president could become the president, but then it remains to be seen whether he enjoys the support of the leader of Iran, the supreme leader, Khamenei, and whether or not he's in a position to take over as president in the long term. So I think things will be up in the air within Iran. But even more important, there will be a lot of uncertainty in the region of the Middle East. Israel has long considered Iran its greatest threat, particularly due to Tehran's controversial nuclear program, the ballistic missiles, and support for armed groups which are really committed to Israel's destruction. And of course, Iran sees itself as the primary patron of the Palestinian resistance to Israel. So all this remains up in the air, what is going to shape up. But I'm afraid that tensions in the Middle East will only increase now.
Interesting, you should mention that tensions in the Middle East are all set to perhaps escalate in the weeks and months ahead. Geeta, when former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, had travelled to Iran for the NAM summit, I was on board Air India One, and we were reporting from Iran, where the Iranian leadership and the government very extensively spoke of Israel's interference in killing Iranian nuclear scientists and those who were involved in scientific projects in Iran. Is there an apprehension that that will only increase and tensions between Israel and Iran are set to escalate in the months ahead?
Well, absolutely. Tensions will escalate. But in terms of responsibility for the crash, that's something that depends on the investigations that will be carried out, Gaurav, and the investigations and questioning with regards to the two other helicopters and the crew that was present in those helicopters. Should there be suspicion of an interference or outside hand to the crash, this could blow up. The region will be burning. There will certainly be massive ramifications when it comes to not just Iran, Israel, the region, but globally. So we're looking at a very, very sensitive situation right now where things could blow up. But should this not be an outside hand and just a crash because of inclement weather, then in all probability we will be looking at what happens within. While I don't see instability in transition, there is certainly going to be a lot of question in succession, because when it comes to Ayatollah Khamenei's succession, there were two major contenders. One was Ebrahim Raisi, a hardliner, like you said, and the other was Khamenei's son himself, Mojtaba Khamenei.
Yes.
But there was a lot of conversation and news about how the supreme leader preferred Ibrahim Raisi as his successor to his own son. So we do not really know what really happened over here, but this could spell serious and could have serious ramifications within when it comes to politics of succession in Iran. But in terms of stability with the government, I don't see that really being affected much. However, if there is any information, news, or even the slightest suspicion of an outside hand, expect this to become one of the biggest crises that the global community will be facing, not just with regards to how it will impact the region, but it could have major ramifications globally.
Major ramifications for the region, major ramifications for the world. When it came to President Raisi played a critical role in bringing Iran even closer to China. If I remember correctly, it was in February 2023 that he traveled to China and played a key role in bringing the two countries together. Ambassador Dayal, does this impact the axis that seems to be developing? Many in the West say Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, that's emerging as a very powerful axis to counter US and NATO forces.
Well, Iran's influence extends beyond the Middle East and its rivalry with Israel. Western countries have for long suspected Iran of pursuing nuclear weapons under the guise of a peaceful atomic program. And Iran has also emerged as a key ally of Russia following its invasion of Ukraine. And it is believed that Iran supplied drones that have wreaked havoc in the Ukrainian cities. Similarly, with China, Iran's relations have strengthened. In fact, China is now by far the single largest buyer of Iranian oil, and it has ignored United States sanctions. This aspect has also brought the two countries closer together. So, given the influence of Iran in international affairs, way beyond the Middle East region, I think the effects of this helicopter crash in which the president has been killed, along with the foreign minister and some other senior officials, this development will have very serious ramifications and may serve to bring China and Russia even closer to Iran in the coming months.
Interesting you should mention that, and let's also talk about for a moment the relationship between India and Iran. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken to social media platform X to post, deeply saddened and shocked by the tragic demise of Dr. Saeed Ebrahim Raisi, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. His contribution to strengthening India-Iran bilateral relationship will always be remembered. My heartfelt condolences to his family and the people of Iran. India stands with Iran in this time of sorrow. This is a message that's come from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And Geeta, India and Iran are two civilizational partners. That's the message that two countries have always given out. It's not just restricted to oil. This is a civilizational relationship, and India has stood with Iran through a very difficult period.
Well, that's right. Not just the president. There are two very important people who died. The president and the foreign minister expect a message from Dr. Jaishankar as well. They have been in close contact when it comes to Iran-India relations not so very long ago. In fact, just last week, Gaurav, India and Iran signed a very important deal, a pact on Chabahar, which again was steered by these very people who have been handling and forefronting the foreign policy of Iran. And the Chabahar Pact is a critical deal for both the countries, and something where we've seen the West raise objections. And despite that, the two countries have gone ahead with what they think strategically is important for both the countries to circumvent Pakistan and have access to not just Afghanistan, Central Asia, Eurasia. So it is a very important country for India, and at this juncture, to lose two very important leaders that India was engaging is certainly a huge loss. But then again, this is a time where Iran will have to now set its house in order in order to ensure that they have the right people at the right places. The vice president of Iran will be taking over in all probability if they go by the route. And we'll have to see how that transition really takes or allows continuum within Iran when it comes to their policies, domestic or, for that matter, their foreign policy.
Ambassador Dayal, you've served in Iran, and both the countries, very, very old civilizations. How has this relation developed? How would you describe India's relationship with Iran and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's condolences that have just come for the President of Iran?
Well, India has repeatedly spoken of civilizational ties between, of course, us and Iran. And this is a reference to the interactions of the Persian and the Indus Valley civilization over a period of millennia. Now, of course, US policy is to isolate Iran. However, India has never shared US assessment of Iran.
Yes.
And India's relations with Iran have been traditionally positive. If we would recall that in January 2003, the two countries had signed a strategic partnership with the New Delhi Declaration. So I think that this relationship is on the right track, and the two countries recently signed an agreement which will give India the right to monitor, control, and run the port named Shahid Beheshti Terminal in Chabahar Port. And this agreement will open up a trade route between South Asia and Central Asia via Iran, bypassing Karachi and Gwadar ports in Pakistan. So Iran was a key player when it came to India's global outreach being increased. And of course, the Chabahar port is also significant in the context of the international north-south transport corridor, which will enable India to have a transport corridor running across to Russia's Baltic coast. So Iran was playing a very important role in India's foreign policy. And I don't think that this will get derailed on account of any development which may take place in regard to the succession, who becomes president, etc., because they will see that it is in Iran's interest also to have a close relationship with India. Of course, more interesting and more critical will be how the developments shape out in the context of Iran's intense enmity with Israel and the tensions with the United States and its Western allies.
And this is where Indian foreign policy or India's foreign policy plays a very critical role. Two countries, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Geeta, have repeatedly pointed out that there could be two countries that are at war and yet both remain good friends of India, whether it's Iran and Israel, whether it's Russia or Ukraine. There are multiple examples across the globe where warring partners are very close friends of India. But how do we look at this development? India and the United States, extremely close strategic partners. India and Iran, very close strategic partners. And when it comes to Chabahar port, America is obliquely or not so obliquely warning India of sanctions when we went ahead with the Chabahar Pact.
Well, that's a very interesting piece of information or development that took place not last week when the Chabahar Port Pact was inked between India and Iran. We had the U.S. State Department's deputy spokesperson say, or almost warn India of sanctions. Whilst we know that when it comes to Chabahar, there has been a carve-out, there has been a waiver in the past. One has to wait and see how DC really reacts to it, because in an interview to us, Eric Garcetti, the ambassador of US to India, said that there is no clarification on or clarity on what was said at the State Department, and that they're seeking more information and clarification from headquarters, which means that they might walk back on what Vedant Patel had said, given that this was an area that already had waiver. Also, the waiver was for Afghanistan. The fact that statements that came from both ends spoke about beyond Afghanistan to Eurasia, Central Asia, might be the reason why the Americans reacted the way they did. Having said so, we do know that New Delhi has put its foot down on Chabahar. It's a very critical and strategically very important port for India, not just a counter to Gwadar, because Gwadar has hardly any port business. Gaurav, it has more to do with the fact that this will allow India access to that part of the world where we can circumvent Pakistan and yet reach Afghanistan, Eurasia, Central Asia. So very important for India, very important for Iran to have that relationship going with India, where they do know that having close ties with Pakistan does not really help their cause strategically, but having close ties with India does, because India does.
In fact, Ambassador Dayal,
and with Russia, and with China, although the relationship is complicated, Iran has good ties with China. So it is a very important relationship to continue holding together. And I don't see that really waver because of any change within Iran.
Okay. Ambassador Dayal, when we talk about Chabahar, when we talk of India's relationship with Iran, when we also talk about Iran and Pakistan virtually going after each other, especially at the borders, Iran's president was very firm, or the government was very firm. Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror that was bleeding Iran would not be permitted. Two Muslim countries, of course, one Shia, one Sunni, but they've been at each other's throats in the border area at the Iran-Pakistan border. How do you look at the line that was taken by the Iranian establishment on Pakistan?
Well, for a considerable amount of time, there has been great concern in Iran about how terrorist organizations based in Pakistan are launching attacks on Iran. And there have also been concerns about how the Shiite minority is treated within Pakistan.
Yes.
In fact, this is a matter which draws the attention of the Iranian leadership, and it has been raised with the Pakistanis. There are concerns that Shias in Pakistan are under constant attack, and this is a great irritant in their bilateral relationship, which becomes compounded by the sort of involvement of the ISI in the attacks by terrorist organizations on targets within Iran. So the relationship is very tense. And in fact, that's how there were these attacks which took place recently, in recent months, between the two sides. Iran attacked sites in Pakistan, and Pakistan counterattacked, and then Iran attacked again. Of course, the visit of the Iranian president to Pakistan was meant to help de-escalate the matter and to bring down the tension. But, the causes which lead to these tensions remain in place. The treatment of the Shiite minority by the Pakistani establishment has not shown any improvement. So for this reason, the tensions between the two countries will continue to increase.
Okay.
And the setting up of the Chabahar port has again been a thorn in the flesh of Pakistan. They have not liked it. They want the access to Afghanistan and Central Asia to be only through Karachi and Gwadar.
Yes.
So the Pakistanis are very unhappy with the Chabahar port, which bypasses Karachi and Gwadar, and which gives India access to Afghanistan and to the region beyond, to Central Asia and onwards on to Russia. So the India factor also plays a role in Iran's relationship with Pakistan. But I think Iran is quite determined to strengthen its relationship with India. It sees India as a genuine friend. And India has also backed Iran wherever necessary.
We have such a large Shia population in our country, and that Shia population lives, with all their rights in peace and harmony, and they're not targeted in our country the way Shias are targeted in Pakistan or some other parts of the world. But I want to come to another part. Iran and China are close, Geeta, and China does not want the Chabahar port to progress because that's a disaster for China-Pakistan economic corridor and Gwadar. At the same time, India and Iran are close, but there are at times questions about not just Chabahar, but Iran's stand on Kashmir. Do we notice a change there, especially with peace in Kashmir? The fact that Shias were able to take out, their peace march and observe their ceremonies, which they could not for over 3 decades in Kashmir.
Well, we don't see a major change or a shift in policy when it comes to Kashmir, but certainly it is not voiced the way it used to be voiced in the past. There has been the sensitivity of India that has been taken into account when Iran discusses various issues. There is also a bilateral aspect that Iran brings to the table when it comes to Kashmir, saying that the two countries will have to resolve it peacefully through dialogue. So there is a shift in terms of how they are going or to their approach, but certainly not maybe to the policy, given that there is a lot of concern with regards to how the Muslim world will see Iran should there be a marked shift. So, but that does not take away from the fact that Iran works very closely with India, wants greater engagement with India, and today India is Iran's critical partner. They would want more engagement with India than less. In the past, we've seen, because of sanctions, a reduced engagement between Iran and India. The oil intake had reduced considerably. But after the Russia-Ukraine war, where India took a stand on continuing to engage Russia and then further went ahead and started buying oil, which Russia certainly was not a traditional partner of India.
Okay.
There has been a shift and expectation that the same will be accorded to Iran as well, because India has come out and officially said, which we have for quite some time, but more vociferously so after the Russia-Ukraine war, that we do not recognize country-based sanctions.
Yes.
So again, for Iran, the statement, the position that India has taken is very important, and India certainly has become a very critical, important partner for Iran. That is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world.
And Ambassador, you must have seen and experienced, Iran's stance on Kashmir. And has there been a slight change? Do we need to do more, impress upon Iran that they can't take that same, stand that they have been taking all along? Or is that something we've learned to live with and move ahead and move forward on other aspects of our relationship?
Well, till now, Iran's position in regard to Kashmir has not been as we would have wanted it. Iranian statements on Kashmir have often been unfriendly, but we have learned to live with them, and we have tried to build the bilateral relationship. As Iran recognizes that there are strong interests which it has in developing a closer relationship with India, its position in regard to Kashmir may soften. In other words, we may not hear so many statements coming out of Iran in regard to Kashmir. Moreover, it is evident to everybody, including people in Iran, that while there is so much of public discontent in Pakistani occupied Kashmir, there is no such discontent in the state of in India's Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir region, and that people are well off, there is well-being, and the sort of unhappiness which prevails in POK contrasts with the happiness which prevails in Kashmir in India.
Yes.
So I think the Iranian government will realize that the real work lies in ensuring the well-being of people, and the government of India is doing it, while the government of Pakistan is clearly failing to do so. So
Yes.
this might have an effect on Iranian thinking also.
You know, as we talk about Iran's relationship with India, with China, with countries in the region and with the United States, Geeta, as this news now sinks in Iran that, President Raisi is no more, the foreign minister is no more, 9 on board that ill-fated Bell 212 helicopter are no more. Whether it's the Houthis, the Hamas or the Hezbollah, do we see increased activities in the weeks and months ahead, or will it all depend on one Supreme Leader Khamenei and whoever is the successor now?
Well, the fact is that the situation between Israel and Hamas is quite critical. At this juncture, we see Israel going ahead with its action. And if the actions of Israel continue, there is going to be retaliation from these quarters. That certainly is not going to stop. But there are messages that are coming in, Gaurav. We see that the Iranian ambassador to India has just posted on X, the social media platform, about the death. He says that President Raisi, along with Foreign Minister, Governor Malik Rahmati, and the Imam of Friday prayers, and several other passengers have been martyred in a helicopter crash in northwest of Iran. And interestingly, today there is an emergency meeting that has been called, and at the emergency meeting there is an empty chair that has been put for late President Ebrahim Raisi as well. Very telling pictures that are coming in from Iran, an empty chair, an empty seat at the emergency meeting that has been called after the pronouncement of his death. There now has been a formal pronouncement as well. The death of Ibrahim Raisi and other important leaders from Iran who were accompanying him have been announced. So it is going to be a long day for the leaders of Iran. As to one, for this news to sink in. Secondly, to see how they're going to take things forward, to decide on transition. But yes, when it comes to the region, I don't see the region calming down or becoming a more difficult a space than it already is. We might, in all probability, see continuation. Israel might be able to use this as a moment of vacuum in Iran that they can actually capitalize on. But we do know that there are people who are in charge of how to back, how to support the Hezbollah, the Houthis of Yemen, and the extremist organizations within Iraq to continue their support for Hamas. So one will have to wait to see how that really pans out in the coming days. The more important part of this entire transition will be how it really comes about, not just when it comes to government, which would be rather smoother than the succession question that will be asked and will take place in days to come. Having said
Okay.
that, Gaurav, just add one more thing,
Yes.
like Ambassador Al was saying, that there are many in the hardline faction within Iran who would be mourning the death of the leadership, but there are many others who, in all probability, are in celebratory mode. There were some visuals that had come in that we can't confirm whether they were actually from Iran, but on social media of celebrations and firecrackers on some in some areas. But also the activists who live in exile outside have been celebrating this. So it's a very sad situation where we see the ones who revolt against the current regime in Iran are joyous about what really happened. But within Iran, this is going to take a huge turn. Also for the region, it's going to be a difficult time since these two leaders certainly were very important in Iran's nuclear program, their foreign policy, the decisions on the Israel-Hamas war,
Okay.
and the conflicts in the region. Also,
The fact is the women, Geeta, they would be celebrating, a large number of women would be celebrating, their lives had been straight jacketed, whether it's wearing a hijab at all times, you cannot be seen without your hijab, the chastity code that women can only behave in a certain way. Women had rebelled in numbers, they'd come out on the streets and rebelled. But, you were mentioning that vacuum, and in the last 1 minute of the show, Ambassador Dayal, there's a vacuum right now, and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's made it very clear, this battle continues till the destruction of Hamas. Can he pursue that dream of his to completely destroy Hamas, including in Rafah or wherever else Hamas leaders may be hiding? Or is America systematically, in the run-up to presidential elections, America is also restricting the way, the blank check, if I may, that Israel had so far?
Well, America has tried to check Israel's aggressiveness, but it has not succeeded in doing so. And Netanyahu, for a variety of reasons, including those related to his domestic situation, he's pursuing a policy of strident aggression towards the forces which he sees as his adversaries. So I think that this extremely volatile situation in the Middle East could be further ignited by the helicopter crash in which the Iranian president, foreign minister, and some other officials have been killed. Let me mention that while there may be a vacuum, as you mentioned right now, but that vacuum is in all likelihood going to be filled by the hardliners.
Yes.
Because there will be grave suspicions that there was an external hand, there was a foreign hand, and people will certainly be inclined to believe the theory that Mossad was behind it, even if proof is not found. So all this will compound the situation, and I think tensions will escalate. I am afraid that the situation is very dangerous, and I think that India must try and somehow help in de-escalation at the moment, because otherwise things don't look good at all.
I will let that be the last word of this part of the show. We will continue to track developments on this big story very, very closely. Ambassador Dayal and Geeta Mohan for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks. So the word is, it's confirmed now, Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi and their foreign minister, along with 7 other officials, are no more after that helicopter crash in the East Azerbaijan region when they were returning after the inauguration of a dam. We will continue to track the story very closely. A quick break. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.